Hello friends, welcome to the Handyman dev stream. It has been a very long time since I've done one of these. It's been a little while since I've done a devlog as well. Uh, as I've said in the past, this is probably one of the worst types of games you could be making to want to keep a regular devlog or dev stream, especially on something like YouTube. It is an adult game that is puzzle oriented because A, YouTube doesn't like adult content, and B, I'd just be giving away all the puzzles if I was showing you what I was working on all the time. But today we are going to try and work on some stuff that is a little less spoiler oriented, and yeah, we'll just kind of get cracking with that. So I guess let's get to it. So, and we are working on day 10 here, so there will be some mild spoilers, I guess, if you're watching this, but nothing that I think is going to ruin the day for you. But a few mechanics, I guess, that I'm introducing into the game that will be relevant to day 10 in particular. All right, so if you've played the game since the last update, you are probably aware, or if not, you will now be aware that you have the ability to do things in your inventory that you used to have to drop things to do to them. For example, adding ice to the glass of water, or that kind of thing, mixing things that are in your inventory. So you can now do that straight from your inventory. So in the past, if you had this glass here, fill it up, and then you would go over, grab the ice, ice tray I should say, freeze it, and then from here what you would have to do is drop your item, and then you could add ice to it. But as of the last update, you can now, from within your inventory, add the ice or other things like that. So now you've got an empty ice tray and you've got ice water. So other than just pure convenience, one of the reasons I wanted to do that is because I'm going to add the ability to consume items. So to drink the water or to eat something that you have in your inventory. So that is actually what we're going to start with right now. So, and just to give you a quick rundown on how the code works for interacting with items. So every object in the game that you can actually interact with, so if I go over here to the sink, so here's the sink here. So every item that you can interact with has this component called an interact, which is basically what tells the game that, hey, this is something the player can interact with, or one of the AI characters as well. Now, on top of that, there's different interactables. So those are components which have some sort of interaction functionality. So the interact is just kind of like an overlord control, and then the actual interactables are the specific things you can do with that interact. So we need to make a new interactable, which I'm going to call I consume, because I want it to both be capable of handling drinking and eating, and potentially something down the line, which I can't think of, but could be useful. So as you can see here with the sync, we have three interactables. We have I turn on, I turn off, and then I alter item, which is kind of just a generic title, which in this specific case, what it does is changes your object, like a glass or a mug, into a glass with water or a mug with water. So it alters an item in your inventory. So what we're going to do, as I mentioned, is we're going to make a new interactable. We're going to call it I consume. So we're going to make a new C# script, call it I consume. So I actually do have this older interactable called I drink, which is actually very old. In fact, it predates even the Handyman itself, because originally the Handyman was, for a very short period of time, was going to be a game which took place in a bar, and you could interact with different objects with kind of the same setup as currently, but there wasn't a whole lot else to it at that point. Like I said, that was very early on. That was like maybe a month or two before that game became the Handyman. At any rate, so let's open up this I consume, and then we're going to jump over here. And so here's our behavior, our components, and we want to make this a child class of the interactable class. So it's going to take on all the functionality that all the other interactables have, and then it's going to, or the base class of interactable has, I should say. And then from there we'll add on additional functionality. So here's all my interactables, almost all of them start with an I, just so I know that it's part of that family. So this is I consume. Here's I swap prefabs. Here's the I drink, which is what I was talking about briefly. So first thing I need to do is I need to give it this interactable model, which is basically just a string, a series of text characters, which the interact component uses to figure out what you're trying to actually interact with when you click on it, and what's available to be interacted with. So I always just make that interactable model the name of the class, but all lowercase. So I'm going to just actually copy that. I'm going to make our start function and then we're going to paste that, and then we're going to change the I drink to I consume. Alright, so the other thing that we need to do is we need to have some way, so when you click on an item and that little menu pops up, it needs to know what it should say. So in this case, this is just and it uses this variable called menu name, which I can hard code in there. But in this case, it's probably going to be better to, because I want it to be capable of both eating and drinking, and like I said, potentially something else down the line, make it not make it hard coded, but make it something that I can choose individually with each different object that I'm making. So for a glass of water, I can make it say drink, or for an apple, I can make it say eat. And let's see, so we'll just call I have a kind of standard thing that I use. If if I can remember what it's called. Bear with me for a second here as I just try to look at some of my other classes. Of course, none of the ones I'm looking at have it. Oh, okay, that's what I use. I just call it menu script. Or menu descript, I should say. So rather than having this hard-coded, we're going to reference this other string. Alright, so right now this interactable is not doing anything, but I just want to get it in here, so I'm going to jump over back to Unity here. And let's grab let's grab an apple for right now. So we're going to jump into the prefab for apple, and then I'm just going to add this component. Sorry, I did it on the other screen so you couldn't actually see it, but I just added this iConsume component. So it's, as I said before, it's got in a bunch of built-in functionality, which it's grabbing from my interactables class, and then in addition to that it added this menu description down here. So for the apple I just wanted to say eat. Some of the other things that are part of this too are, so like there's an interaction animation checkbox. So this basically is what tells the game whether or not when you interact with something, Grant lifts up his arm, which for the most part is something that you want to have happen. So when he opens the door, he reaches up, pulls up his arm. Then the interaction takes place during that animation when his arm is fully extended. If this is unchecked, the interaction happens instantaneously without any kind of animation. We'll leave it checked for now. I assume that's what we're going to want. So quickly save that. So right now it's not doing much, but we should see it when we click on the apple. So go to the fridge here, and again all we're looking for is for this to pop up. So now we do have this eat, which is what we want. Okay, so now the next thing we want to do, so here's, I guess this is kind of the tricky part. So I do want you to be able to, so if it's in your inventory, I want it to remove it from your inventory. Obviously, if it's not in your inventory, then we don't want to do anything to your inventory. So if it's like if I had clicked on the eat button right there, it would not do anything to your inventory. So we're gonna do this function here. So public override interact with, and then we're going to make a new function. So this function gets called at the point, as I mentioned, if I've got that check mark box for the animation, this function's gonna get called at the moment that Grant reads full extension. Otherwise, it'll happen instantaneously when you click on the eat button. But then I want it to subsequently call another. We'll just call this consume. So this interact with is just a generic that all the interactables have access to. Then from there, they have their own unique code that gets carried out. So I guess for right now, I just want to debug. Make sure that's all behaving as expected. Let's just do a log error so it's easy to see. And we'll jump back over to Unity. So this time when we click on the apple and then click eat, we should see down here it should say it worked. Alright, so down here, actually let me clear out my console here so there's nothing there. And then as you saw him extend his arm, and then it said it worked, so that's all behaving as expected. Alright, and then let's jump back over here. So there's two possible conditions, two scenarios in which you might be calling this, as I mentioned, one in which it's in your inventory, and then one in which it isn't, which is what we were just looking at. So it's just sitting there, and you go to consume it. So I guess for the moment, let's ignore the inventory situation and just pretend like the only situation is that you consume it. So in that case, we want to actually destroy the object. So I'm going to call my loader and tell it to release our game object. That should get rid of it. So the loader is just an overarching game system that keeps track of what's loaded and what's not in the game. So there is a downside to adding this, which is that it does potentially create the situation that you could cut yourself off from a solution to a puzzle. Alright, but let's ignore that for the second, and then eat, and then our apple's gone. So that works as expected. Like I said, there is this other situation we want to have to keep in the back of our minds of it being in your inventory. So the other thing I want to do is I want to and this is slightly spoilery, is I want to add some effect to our character here. And in this case, basically I want it to affect Grant's breath. So for right now, I'm not going to worry about how that looks, but I just want to I guess let me jump over here. I just want the game to basically register that his status has changed, is what it boils down to. So I guess my question is, where do I want to store that information? So I guess the place that makes the most sense is this um, is this component here called the interaction interface. So this is what tells the game. This is basically the communication between an interact and any of the characters. So all the characters have this interaction interface component, and this is what communicates between your character and the actual interact to get the behavior. So I guess this is probably the place that it makes the most sense to store that. So sorry, I got my Unity is up on two different screens. I was looking at this one. So this is the component I was talking about, the interaction interface. So it actually, the player character has a more specific version of it. Let me find the interaction interface in here. So this is the generic version of it over here. Okay, so because part of the reason I'm putting it here is because I want your status to affect what you can and cannot interact with based on the fact that you have bad breath. So for time being, I'm just going to put it at the bottom of the variables I have here. I'm going to serialize it just so I can see it in the inspector. And this is just going to be a Boolean, so a true or false. We're just going to call it has bad breath. Now, it is that breath or breathe? I always get those confused. So I want to get rid of the E. Not that it really matters, but there's potential that I could have other status effects based on what you eat, which is something to consider. But I think for the time being, a simple Boolean for one status effect is going to suffice. Down the line, I might have to change my approach a little bit, but for right now, this should do the job. I'm just going to close that one and then go back to our component here, and basically what I want to do is set up another Boolean within the I consume component, and so there's two different things I need to consider here. One, does it cause bad breath? And then two, does it clear bad breath? Because those are two effects that I want. And they're separate effects. It's not just a simple Boolean, because I also want the third option of it doesn't do anything. That's the default status. So I guess we'll keep it simple. Again, I may have to, depending on if I add more status effects down the line, alter my approach here. But for right now, this should be sufficient. But so we'll do one Boolean that says causes bad breath, and we'll do a second one that says clears bad breath. So by default, both of these are going to be false. So nothing happens. And if we jump back over to Unity, after it loads our scripts here, we should be able to take a look at our apple and then see both of those. For the time being, we're going to just going to, for the sake of seeing that if this works or not, we're going to check mark this causes bad breath to make sure it works. So, and I'm sorry I keep doing that. I'm looking at the other screen. So I just check marked this over here. Okay, so then what we wanted to do, so now we're back over here. So we're just going to do a couple if statements. So if causes bad breath, we're going to do something else. If clears bad breath. So again, as I mentioned before, the interaction interface, which is the component on the actual characters, is what deals with these interactables. So these interactables have built into them access to whatever is interacting with them. So, and it's just saved in a variable called II. So we need to, before I do that, we need to, in this interaction interface, we're just going to add two quick, actually, yeah, we'll do two quick functions, get and a set. Get, what did I call set. So we're just going to say take in a Boolean called isBad, and then I'm going to make this a void. Take in a Boolean, and then has bad breath was our variable. We're going to set has bad breath to isBad. So we can use this both when we're clearing and when we're setting it to be bad. Then we'll also do a get function, which will return a Boolean. I'm going to actually change this to has just so I'm consistent with my variable. Set has bad breath, and then this to get has bad breath. In this case, we don't need to take in a variable, and we're just going to return has bad breath. All very basic stuff. Okay, so again, this is on our character, his interaction interface or her interaction interface. So that the idea is when that interaction takes place, it has the potential to trigger this. So go back to iConsume, and then now if our variable causes bad breath has been set, we want to talk to that interaction interface, and then we want to say set has bad breath to true. And then similarly down here, so now I could do like this, which is fine in this case. The reason I don't want to do that is because I don't want to always set the character's breath based on this variable. Only if it's true do I want to set it to true. If it's false, I don't want to do anything. So, which is why we have our little setup here. If this variable clears bad breath is true, then we want to clear it. Then we want to set it to false. And that should, so So we did. Let's jump over to Unity. It's going to compile our scripts that we just edited. And we did set our apple to have, so the apple's going to cause us to have breath. We're going to actually now take a look at our player here, and we can see here's this variable has bad breath. We're going to start up the game, and all we're looking for in this case is for this variable to change. So I'm going to not maximize the game window this time when it starts up, so you can still see this over here. Alright, and we'll open up our fridge. You can see currently bad breath is set to false, and then when we eat, now our variable has changed. And at the moment this doesn't do anything, but that's functioning as we want it to. Now the other thing so let's pause this and then verify that our clearing works as well. So we're gonna jump into this, if I can find it. Where's the other apple? Just trying to find the other apple so I can. Too low. Oh, I'm totally upside down. Let's do it this way. Okay, so I'm just going to, for the sake of experimenting, switch this other apple to clears bad breath, and then again we'll go back to Grant here and watch his variable, which should clear. When we eat. So, as expected. That's good news. Okay. All right, so what else do we want to do? So as I said, this is only partially functional at the moment. It functions as expected when the object is there on the ground or they're visible to the player, but not going to be functional from the inventory, which is a more complicated situation. But I guess let's try and tackle that. So, so here's our Apple prefab inventory item data. And let's see. I don't do this a whole lot, so that's part of the slowdown here. Trying to think. So I guess one thing that you can do from inventory is use your cologne. So let's look at that as a point of reference. Yeah, so here, so you can see this is the same, this is the name of the interactable component that when it's in your inventory gets added onto All right, it's coming back to me a little bit. Add it onto your item. So when you click on your cologne, you instead of just most items just have the cancel or remove. Cologne also has the has an additional option. I forget what it's, if it's just use or whatever it is, pop up. So with the apple, we want to do I consume. Then we have to do a little bit of work to. So let's actually open up item. I gotta follow a thread here to get to the point where I can get this working. So that was our inventory interactions is what we're looking for here. Right here. Okay, so I basically want to follow this thread. Okay. So right now there's only two different types of interactions that can get added onto an inventory item. One is the affect global naughty, which is your cologne. The other is combining inventory. So we're going to add a third one now with I consume. So what we're doing is I'm looking at these other ones that I've done in the past to try and remember how I have this set up. So we want to basically make a new I consume component. Let's call it add this. Let's game object dot add component. Consume. So we're creating a new component. So we're adding this onto our inventory little icon essentially. We're adding on a I can't do that. Okay, we'll call it consume me. That's fine. Consume me dot from inventory. So this is I'm pointing at my screen like you can see that. This is going to be our tell for when we are in here. So this is going to be what differentiates whether or not I knew there was something from inventory. This is going to be what differentiates whether or not the interaction is happening to an actual live item or if it's happening to your inventory. So if it's from inventory, we're going to run different code than if it's not in inventory. Either way, we still want it to run this code about causing bad breath, but we want to do different stuff depending on whether or not we're running it from inventory or if it's a live item out in the world. So we're going to set that to true, and then consume me dot remote activate equals true. So what that does is basically tells the game we're not actually walking up to any object. We're doing this, we're activating this object remotely. So like this, similar to when you turn on the TV using the remote control. That's another instance where it doesn't try and walk anywhere, it just happens. There's a handful of interactions within the game. Most of them are not remote activates. Most of them you actually walk up to an object or something and trigger it. So we're just gonna do a debug for right now. So if it's from inventory, we want to run a debug. If it's not from inventory, we want to actually destroy the game object. Basically what we're going to have to do, if it's from inventory, is we're going to have to adjust our inventory. So it's going to remove it. Otherwise it will, like I said, just remove the actual physical object. Don't know if I need to do anything else. So here's my my Apple inventory item stuff. I added this. So adding this right here is what tells the game to then look at this, which adds the actual component to the inventory item. So I guess let's just, it's a terrible camera angle. Let's just give this another shot. So now I'm going to, rather than eat the apple, I'm going to pick it up. It'll be in my inventory, and then when I click on it in my inventory, I should now get the eat option. And if I choose to eat the apple from my inventory, so I pick it up, apple's there. No, so I need to, so this is the eat option. I have to remember how to set that description, which is actually kind of, now that I'm thinking about it, a little bit more tricky. So so here's out in space here. Here's the panel where you interact with. So right now we've got one for cancel, one for remove, and then this middle one, it doesn't know what to do with, which is our consume. So let's see, where is that actually? Okay, so here's the actual, okay, so the consume is stored not on the buttons there, it's located actually on the icon of it, so on the button. So we've got the I remove, which is this, we've got the I consume, which is what we're looking at, and cancel is not anything. But the issue is that this menu description, which we hard-coded into the actual item, it doesn't know what to put here, so it doesn't put anything by default. So I guess then the question becomes, so if I change this, actually I don't know if it'll change. It won't change anything currently. Well, if it should change if I close this and then this over here? Oh, it didn't work. Doesn't really matter. But all right, let's. I guess the question is, what's the best way to deal with that? So the issue boils down to, we've got this menu description variable, which by default is nothing. So when I put the item into my inventory, it makes that icon and then runs this code here, which looks at my actual inventory item, and then it looks right here and says, okay, what interactions do I need to add to this item? So I put this I consume there so that it will run this code here, adding my component, but it makes basically a blank component, so that menu description is completely empty. Then the question is, what's the best way for me to have it figure that out? And my cat is here to say hi. Hi. Come here. So she's going to help us with this problem here. She's good at helping. So one thing I could do is, so I already have this, these are the different traits for the apple. There already exists this edible. I don't know if I have a drinkable one, but if I don't, I can still make one. 'Cause, I mean, basically I have drink. So I could potentially use that. So I could, in my code, I could say, look for this trait, edible. If it has that trait, then this menu descript text. Oh, shoot. Cat wants to go in the chair where the microphone is. If it has that trait, then change the menu description to eat. If it has drink, change it to drink. And then down the line, if I have another option, it can include that as well. That might be the best way to go. I'm just trying to think of the best way to actually implement that. All right, let's do this for the time being. So I'm going to make a different function, a string that returns a string. I'm going to call it get descript. And so right now I'm just hard coding it to basically always return eat. So I'm actually going to get rid of this. and then the menu name is actually going to be based on this get to script. And like I said, right now it's just hard-coded to say the answer is eat. But let's just make sure that functions as we expect. So when we pick up the apple, click on the apple in our inventory, it should now say eat, which is just a temporary solution. Then we'll actually make that function smart enough to tell the game what we want it to say if it says something else. Now open this up, pick up our apple. The other thing too is that now this is no longer hard-coded into the apple. This is getting that because it's hard-coded into the component, but we should now get that. And the other thing we were checking before was that when we click on eat, we should see down in our down here it should say it worked again, which is what it does. So that we were kind of in the middle of that when we stopped because we didn't have the menu description, but it was running this code here because it's from our inventory. And now okay, so now the trick here is that we need access to the actual inventory item. So that's the next thing. So this is, again, we've got our inventory item here, and if we have access to this, we can search through our traits and see that it has the edible trait, and then we can feed that text in there. If it has drink, we can feed that text in there as well. Let me see on our so all the inventory items are going to have this other component called item, which will have access to that inventory information that I was just talking about. But it's not what I want. Yeah, because all it is basically a component that contains the item instance. So what we could do is I'm going to go back to my consume component here. We'll just serialize this as well. So I'm going to actually, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do slightly different. So I'm going to do one of two things. So I'm going to have the game look at the game object and see if it has this item component that I was just looking at. If it has it, great, we'll use that as our reference to the inventory information. And if it doesn't, we're going to look for a different component, which basically, if our component here, our iConsume component, starts up, it's going to be one of two situations. Either it's in inventory or it's a real physical object. If it's in inventory, then it should have access to that item component. And if it's a real object in the real world, it should have access to this other component called item pickup, which will have our inventory information. So that's how we'll tackle this. So we're gonna go down to our getDescript function down here, and we're going to we'll leave this as is for the moment, and we're gonna say item. So we're gonna basically see if there's an item component equals get component item. So we're going to check on our game object to see if there's one of those components. If there is, so basically what we're saying here is if this component exists, we're saying if it's not equal to null, then we want to, we're going to make an inventory item. Actually, what is it? Item instance. An item instance. And so if there is an item component, we're gonna get its item instance. So our the item instance that I just made is going to be equal to item dot what do I call it? My item instance. There we go. Else. So as we're going through this, so first thing we're going to do when this component, our iConsume component gets made, is it's going to check to see if there's also an item component, which would mean that it's an inventory. If there is, great. We're going to use that component to figure out our information about our object. If that doesn't exist, then we're going to look for a component called item pickup equals get component item pickup. So this is basically the alternative. It's should be either one or the other. Forgot to name it. But we'll still check. So it should be one or the other. It should either have this type of component or it should have this type of component. This is an inventory situation. This is a real world situation. But if this does exist, again, is not equal to null, then we'll use the item instance equals item pickup dot item instance. That's it. Okay. So again, the item pickup is going to contain the information about our item. So if it's an apple, this is the information there. If it's a blue balloon, this is our information there. If it's the bit, the drill bit, this is our information. But these are all the different inventory items, chunks of information. So if it's an item pickup, it's going to store whatever the item is in that variable. And if it's an inventory situation, it's going to store that information in this item component. But if neither of those, if there's some situation in which it doesn't have either of those components, it's going to just basically skip over, and our answer is going to be eat by default. All right. So actually, the way I'll test that is I'll say if item inst is not equal to null. So when we get to this point, we're going to start by saying it's equal to null. So we're going to create an item instance, which is just basically a place in the code where it's going to store the item, the type of item it is. And by default, it's going to start with an empty spot. So this is saying create an empty spot where we have room for an item instance, but we don't know what it is. Then we go through the code and we say, okay, here's a potential place we could find it. Does this exist? This potential place exist? If so, great. Get that information from there. If that place doesn't exist, check for this other location. If that location is there, great, use that information. If neither of those two are true, we're going to skip over this code and basically return our initial answer. But assuming that one of those two is true, we now have access to the item itself. Then we need to see if we can find our actual trait that we want. So in the case, we want it to either be edible or drink. That's what we're looking for. Okay, so now how do I do that? So I don't love hard coding stuff in, but I might have to. So here's our traits, and all the trait is just a string. It's just some text. But having it in this fashion of like an object makes it significantly easier. So here's drink. It's just the text drink. So I can hard code it in there, because my other option would be to set up public item. This is not going to end up working, but let's just, for the sake of argument, drop it in there. So what I could do is create a spot for the no, actually that's wrong. I want it to be a trait, not an item, because I'm looking for the trait of drink. And then let's go back to our apple. So right now I've got, you can see here's my component, my iConsume component, and down here I've got this new spot where I've got a place for my trait. So I can click on this here and then look through all my different traits here, and there, now I've got drink. Now the problem with this is only attached to this apple, so this is not really going to solve my problem. But if I go back to here, I can then search through my item instance. I have to remember what the code is. Traits, yeah. Has trait. Okay, so this is what I want. So my item instance, the item itself, and then the traits of that item. I want to see if it has the traits of drink. Oops. So theoretically what I would do is say if the item instance has the trait of drink, then we want to change our answer to drink. And I got my thing switched around there. So that would work if this was going to work, but this won't work. The reason this won't work is for the same reason that the menu description didn't work in the first place. I can make it work for the physical objects, but when it creates an inventory item, it's not going to work. So I'm going to have to I do have to look at this, how this code works. It might not. It should, yeah, okay, it should work the way I'm thinking it will. So rather than do this, and then I don't love this solution because it leaves the door to, if I change a trait down the line, that it could screw me over, but I don't think that'll be a problem. But so right now I just deleted that variable of drink, and I'm basically gonna remake it. So I'm gonna trait dot, so I'm gonna invent a new trait called drink. And then I'm just going to set the name of it to drink. So here's where this potentially could be trouble. So right now I'm hard coding that what it's looking for is a trait called drink. If at some point down the line, for whatever reason, I decide, hey, actually I need to change this trait to anything other than drink, if I call it drink 1, now my code doesn't work unless I go and I hand change this to drink 1. Oops. Again, I don't think that'll be a problem, but that's kind of the thing I'm setting myself up to fail with potentially down the line. But I'm thinking we're going to be okay. So currently the way this works right now is I've got two options. One is that, and is the default option, and that is that it's going to default to just saying eat. If it finds that our item has the trait of drink, then it will change our thing to drink, which is probably sufficient. Like I said, down the line I might decide that I want another category, in which case then I will have to expand this. But I think for right now, oh, I'm sorry, I've been on the wrong screen. I apologize. Let me quick walk us through. So I added this code here basically. So I created in memory a new trait. I hard code that it's equal to this string of text, and then I check our actual inventory item to see if it has that trait. If it does, we change our text in the menu to say drink. If any of that is not the case, then our text is just going to say eat. So I guess the way we will test that right now, first of all, we'll just leave everything as is and see if when we grab the apple, it should still say eat in both cases of the physical object and from inventory. Then what we'll do is we'll do the Dr. sodas, and I guess we can do the water bottles too. So right now those don't have the I consume. Okay, so it says eat. We ate it, it disappeared. If I pick it up, showed in my inventory, I have the eat interactable option. Oh, so there you can see actually that's a place where it doesn't make sense for him to move his hands. So actually what we'll do, not a big deal, in our code over here, so we will jump down here, and then we'll just tell it to turn off the interaction animation in the case of he's eating it from inventory. Okay, so then the next thing we'll do is we will find our soda. And I think this should just mostly work. To remember what that's called. So actually this has, yeah, I should change it. So these are some of the oldest things that exist. So it's just called soda, and I actually have both the item and the item pickup on here. So I actually want to get rid of the item because that's no longer used in the way that it was originally. So I got rid of that. Took off that item component, but in the item pickup component, I can see that my item instance is a soda, so I'll just jump over here and change that to have this I consume. So actually I do need to add it onto the actual object itself. Here we go. So on this inventory interactions, add the I consume. This will make it so that when I have it in my inventory, I now have this third option, which should say drink, because it has this drink trait. Then I want to jump into the component here, and then I need to, so that I can consume it, I can drink it, even if it's just a physical object, similar to the apple, but it should say drink. So I guess let's find out. Alright, moment of truth. Hey, look at that. I don't know how well you can see that. Let me blow it up. We do in fact have our drink option. Now if I pick it up, and there we go again, we do have our drink. So if I do that with the water bottle, I don't get it because I haven't added the I consume component onto it yet, but that looks like it's behaving, which is a miracle in and of itself. So really the last thing we need to do with this is we need to take it out of our inventory if we know if it's in our inventory. So I'm just trying to think this through here so I don't screw stuff up. So I can just remove the item. Maybe what I'll do is, rather than keep this code for the item instance down here, bring it up to the top here so I can use this multiple times. Let's separate this out. Get item void, get item instance. So we're just moving our code around here for the most part to make it so we don't have to do this same thing multiple times. I took too much. Okay, so breaking our code up a little bit is never a bad thing. So here I just have to make sure I call this, but so we've got our code here, which is basically going to find the item. The reason I took that out is I want to also use that information up here, so when I remove it from inventory, I already have that at hand. So in our start, so this gets called when we first run our object here. We want to do this get item instance, so right away it's got that information. And then we'll have access, so we're storing that information here. And we can remove it from inventory. And I'm sure there's other things I'm forgetting about, but for right now, let's move forward with that. Alright, so what we expect to see is when we pick this up, oh, that didn't, oh, it said the wrong, it said eat. What did I, it's because I moved that code, no doubt. Oh, yeah, of course, because I need to order these properly. So it's first getting the item instance, and then when it goes to figure out what the item description is, it already has that information. So if I just order that properly, we should be in much better shape. And go back to Unity. Alright, this hopefully will now say drink when I click on the soda. Yep, so we're going to pick it up, and now when we drink it, it removes it from our inventory. I'm getting some choppiness, I'm not sure why. Eat the apple. Apple's gone. Alright, so nothing very exciting, but it functions as expected. Alright, now we're going to jump back into what we were kind of talking about earlier. So it basically, if it running that component does two things. One, it removes the item either from inventory or from the world, and I should say it can either grant bad breath or it can remove his bad breath, which we haven't actually set up anything. So and I'm not sure if it's going to make it into the game, but we'll give it a shot here. So I'm going to start by adding a particle system to Grant here to represent his bad breath, so you can visually see it. Now my concern is that it's going to be, I want it to be so you can see it, but I don't want it to be too distracting. So there we go. That looks good, right? Good enough. So let's tweak with this a little bit, just to get it so it's manageable. And I don't do a whole lot of work with particles, so please bear with me here as I fudge around with it. They're too big, first of all. Start size here. Let's shrink them down. And let's shrink this down. Still way too big, and this size of it is too big. Let's make this be between two different numbers. Why is that so big? Let's have them float up a little bit. No, that's too much. Let's also make them a little bit transparent so they're not so in your face. Now that is just powerful. As I said, I'm just mostly playing around here, so and I don't do a ton of work with particle systems, so I don't always remember how things behave. So we want it to spread out more than that for sure. We also don't want it to move around and like kind of stay in the, like right now it's like locked to his position, which is not quite what we want. we go. This should make it so it doesn't follow him around the same way. Yeah. It's getting there. It's getting there. Let's see, what do we want to do? I don't want so much of it. So one thing we can do is change this to two different numbers to decrease the amount of particles that survive as long, so they have more variance in terms of how long they last. Probably do this as well. Again, make it between two different and I want less of it going. Let's try opening this up more. Yeah, I feel like they're going too fast. Alright, so yeah, I do like it. It's a little much, particularly in first person. That's interesting. Why it's not let's pause it for a second. Particle system is not following his head. You can see it's over to the side, which is not quite right. It's weird. It's all parented to his head. Not quite sure why that is. You can see the cone is following his head, but the actual particles continue to come out from that same spot. Why would that be? Well, I'll probably tinker around with that later. I'm not sure why that is happening. But I do want to. I mean, my main concern right now is the first person situation. Because it is a little overbearing. Little overbearing. The Yeah, I guess that's not bad. I was worried it was too hard to see. Let me blow it up so you can see it better. But like that's the trick is you want it to be visible enough from the third person perspective, but not so bad. I mean, I guess I could tweak it so that it changes depending on your camera, but I'd rather not have to do that, quite honestly. Another thing I could do that would probably help is make it project out more forward, because right now, from this first person perspective, it's all really close to you. But if I made it project out more rather than kind of just going up, that might help. So let's try that. We'll tinker with this a little bit, but then what I want to do is I want to make it so that when you eat the apple, this particle system starts up. Because right now the apple is set to change your breath to bad. Let's see, I wanted to make it project out more than up. Let's start by reducing the amount of up it's doing. Change this to 0.5 and change this to 2, and then actually increase the speed a little bit. So now there's less up and more forward. I guess my only concern with that is I don't want it to be like spraying out, but let's see what that looks like. Now I got to change the color of it. I changed it in the middle of the game. So so it's back. It went back when you make changes in the editor while it's running. They don't carry over once you stop running it. So it went back to being very bright. Yeah, it's still a bit excessive. Anyway, I'll tinker around with this on my own time. Let's try and so right now this is set to start right away. So let's turn that off. Play on awake. And then what I want is for this interaction interface component, which is the thing that's connected to our player here, to grant. We added this variable has bad breath. So what we want to do when we're setting that variable, what we also want to do is we want to add a particle system. We'll just call this breath. So when we set this to true, that he has bad breath, we want to activate our particle system. And when it's set to false, we want to deactivate it. So that should be pretty straightforward. I'm going to separate it out. And breath dot start. Activate. What do you call it? This is a built-in Unity component, so I don't know all the I just set this to true. No. Play. Activate me. I think that works, but then we need to actually call that function, so let me just say activate bad breath equal to is bad. So and as you might recall, this function is being called from our iConsume component. So when we consume something, the iConsume component looks to see if we should change their breath status, and then if so, then we change it here. This gets called. When this gets called, we switch to we either activate or deactivate our bad breath particle system. So theoretically, because this is all attached, this interaction interface is attached to all the characters. You can give this to all of them. Right now, none of them have this additional particle system. I'm going to add this to my player prefab. So now it's built into the player. So basically, up until just a second ago, this particle system was only showing up here in day 10 as I'm working on it, but because I added it, now it exists on all the other days because it's part of the built-in player prefab. And then as I click on here, so here's my interaction interface, and then here's the variable I just made for my particle system called breath. And we're going to just drag I'm going to change this to, so I know what it is. Breath particle system. And now I'll add, actually, let me undo that because it's, let me go in and within the prefab, let me change that to a, say, breath particle system, and drop my particle system into that variable. So now when this variable gets changed, the this gets turned on or off. Now, having said that, if I actually manually change it here in the inspector in Unity, that it won't happen because it gets called when that function gets called, and that wouldn't get called if I just manually changed it here. But from the interacting with a consumable, it would get called. So let's see if this works. Alright, so pull out an apple here. Let's eat it. And there we go. I couldn't see it initially. Takes a second, but it did cause our breath to go bad, which is what we want. I don't remember, I don't think, let me just change the soda to fix his breath, so clears his bad breath. Let's just make sure that works. So yeah, again, the particle system is not following his head for whatever reason. But if I drink this soda, it should clear his bad breath. Did I not click the right one? I only changed one of them. You know what? I probably have to change my code because it's I don't think that this is going to work with the particle system. So I think play does turn it on, but it doesn't turn it off, I guess. I want to pause it, I guess. So let's change this. So if activate me, then we turn on, we'll just make it clear what we're doing. So if activate me, then play, else breath dot pause. So let's then jump back into Unity to actually change our, for the moment, change our soda prefab so that all of them have the clears bad breath. So I can kind of try multiple attempts at this to make sure it's behaving as expected. Alright, so here's our soda, and we're gonna change the whole prefab to say that it clears bad breath. So now all three of them should theoretically clean out our particle system. Alright, let's eat one of these apples that just destroy our breath. And it does do that. Oh yeah, so it paused the part. Yeah, that's not gonna work. It did what I told it to. Just what I told it to doesn't make any sense. Huh, that didn't work. So, what do I need to do? So, not pause. Is it clear? Let's try that. Now that didn't work at all. Oh, I didn't eat it, I picked it up. It did not. Oh, yeah, it's not. So that's another thing I gotta take into consideration. So it doesn't, because it's coming from inventory, it's not carrying over that information about causing bad breath. So that's another, so that worked. So that might be what, oh, it clear, yeah, no, it's not clear. I probably have to do a pause and a clear. Yeah, let me just quick change that code. I'm not even gonna switch over. So I'm just adding that pause back in, keeping the clear. And I will have to address the fact that eating it from inventory doesn't have the effect because it's not carrying over that information about the bad breath or not. But I'll have to do the same thing I did where I looked up at the traits of the item. I'll just have to add like fresh breath or something like that for things that clear your bad breath, and bad breath for as a trait. But at any rate, let's try this again. So we eat the apple, there's our bad breath, and then as you do, to get your breath smelling fresh again, you drink a soda. The only thing I don't like is it completely clears it. I mean, does it just stop? Am I just dumb and it's just stop? Yeah, it's just stop, I bet. So, because I don't want it, I want, the vapors to naturally go away, not to just instantly vanish. Like I said, I don't do a ton with particle systems, so my apologies for not being on the ball with this. But you're getting to see plenty of Tanya, and I know some of you guys are fans of hers, so got that going for you. All right, eat, particle system, drink. Yeah, particle system stops. Try eating another one, particle system, and I expect this to work the same way. Beautiful. So I've got a couple things I need to address. One is that the eating it from the inventory doesn't carry over the information about causing and clearing bad breath. And the other is the What was the other? Now I'm blanking on what the other issue was. Oh, that the breath does not stay with his head, and also just that I want to clean up how it looks. I do like how it looks from the third person perspective, but I don't want it to be so in your face as you're walking around in first person, because I know there's quite a few people who just like staying in first person and not ever leaving first person. So I don't want to destroy their enjoyment of the game. But and this is not presumably going to be a huge part of your day 10, but it is potentially going to be a part of your day 10. So as always, you don't have to do things. There's things you can avoid, and this is one of those things you can avoid. Oh, crap, I didn't mean to do that. But yeah, I don't want it to be too much of a pain. Again, probably what I'll do is have it shoot out a little bit more forward as opposed to up. But at any rate, I think that's plenty of dev stream for today. Appreciate you guys hanging around with me, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.